The first time Eli Mercer saw the woman in the gray coat, she was standing at the very edge of the loading deck, with her head tilted toward the black water as if the sound rising from Elliott Bay was whispering directly into her ear. It was 4:37 a.m., the hour when Seattle still looked half drowned in sleep, and the city lights trembled on the harbor like something alive under the surface. The ferry groaned against the pilings. Chains clanked. A gull screamed once in the fog, then went silent so abruptly it felt wrong. There was a smell in the air that morning stronger than salt and diesel, something damp, rotten, almost sweet like flowers left too long in a sealed room with a body. Eli noticed her because everyone else moved with purpose. Commuters hunched into jackets, coffee in hand. Delivery drivers checked manifests. A college kid yawned into his phone. But the woman in gray stood utterly still while the rest of the world flowed around her, one gloved hand wrapped around the strap of a small black handbag, the other hanging straight at her side. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't looking at the arriving vessel. She was staring at the water beneath the dock. Then slowly, she turned her face toward the wheelhouse windows. Toward him. Even through rain-streaked glass and fog, Eli felt it. That immediate primitive tightening in his chest. The sense that he had not noticed someone. Someone had noticed him first. Welcome back to the channel. Before this story pulls you under, tell me where you're watching from tonight. And if true horror, real-world dread, and stories that leave you checking dark windows are your thing, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Because this one begins on a Seattle ferry just before dawn with a passenger who boards on time every night and never gets off. Eli Mercer had worked the Seattle ferry system for 11 years, long enough to know that most people saw the boats as background noise. To tourists, the ferries were scenic. To commuters, they were routine. To tired parents juggling kids and backpacks, they were floating sidewalks. But to Eli, the ferries were living things, steel bodies with moods, voices, and habits. He knew the hum of an engine that needed attention before anyone saw a warning light. He could tell the wind by the roll under his boots. He could hear when the docking lines went taut a second too late. He liked that kind of certainty. At 38, he had built his life around schedules, signals, tides, and repetition. He lived alone in a modest apartment in West Seattle, 3 floors up, with one view of the Sound through a gap between 2 newer condos. He woke before sunrise, even on off days. Black coffee, no sugar, weather app, work boots by the door. The same battered thermos his younger sister Nora had given him 10 Christmases ago when he first made senior deckhand. His life had contracted over the years into manageable pieces, neat and labeled. That had not always been true. 7 years earlier, Eli's wife Mara had disappeared during a storm off Alki Point. Not on a ferry, not dramatically, just gone. She had gone out late to drive, needing air after an argument neither of them ever got to finish. Her abandoned car was found near the shoreline the next morning. The police called it probable suicide for months, though they never found a body. Later, they softened it to undetermined. People always soften things after enough time passed, as if language could pad the edges of grief. Eli never believed she had chosen the water. Mara hated deep water. She feared even the idea of what moved under it where light couldn't reach. But no evidence ever pointed anywhere else. So Eli learned to live with an empty space that never stayed empty. It followed him into grocery stores, into sleep, into silence. Eventually, he stopped talking about her because people either pitied him or pushed too hard for healing, as if healing were an errand he kept forgetting to run. The ferries helped because they obeyed rules. Water could be charted. Routes repeated. Safety drills worked. Steel held. At least that was what Eli believed. On the Seattle to Bainbridge run, he worked nights and early mornings more often than anyone else wanted to. The hours suited him. The city after midnight felt stripped down to truth. Fewer tourists, fewer families, fewer distractions. Just workers, insomniacs, hospital staff, freight drivers, drunks trying to act sober, and the occasional person who looked like they'd boarded because they couldn't think of anywhere else to go. The crew rotated, but Eli's closest counterpart was Luis Ortega, chief engineer on most of the same runs. Luis was stocky, calm, and impossible to rattle. He had the kind of dark humor that made grim shifts bearable, and a talent for fixing old systems with the affection some people reserved for dogs or grandchildren. Boats are honest, Luis liked to say. People lie, machines complain, Then there was Tasha Reed Terminal Operations, who worked ticketing and boarding with a precision bordering on militant. Nothing slipped past her. Fake passes, expired credentials, confused tourists, overeager cyclists. Tasha saw everything, which was why in hindsight Eli could never stop returning to one fact. Tasha never remembered seeing the woman in the gray coat. The week before Eli first noticed her, strange little things had already begun accumulating around his shifts. Not big things, nothing dramatic enough to report. A manifest count off by one, then correcting itself. A security gate found open after being logged closed. Condensation on interior glass in places that should have been dry. A lost and found umbrella so wet it dripped seawater onto the floor even though no rain had fallen that day. And once, on the lower passenger deck at 2:13 a.m., Eli heard a woman laughing softly near the stern lounge. He walked the entire deck, checked both bathrooms, the stairwell, vending alcove, every seat row. No one. He told himself it was acoustics, wind moving through vent shafts, sleep deprivation, old grief making patterns where none existed. Seattle itself fed that mindset. The city could make anyone feel haunted. The ferry terminals wore layers of weather like skin. Fog erased distance. Lights blurred. Pilings rose out of the dark like drowned trees. On clear days, the Olympics stood hard and blue against the horizon, but at night the sound became something older than geography. A flat, black intelligence. Reflective, but unreadable. There were stories, of course. Every waterfront had them. Old workers talked about hearing footsteps on empty car decks after midnight. About seeing figures where only rain should have been. A retired captain once swore he saw someone standing on the bow during a crossing in weather so brutal no passenger had been allowed outside. A mechanic claimed that after recovering a car from the water years before, the radio in the shop kept turning on by itself, always tuned to the same static heavy station. Eli never bought into any of it, not openly. Still, he had habits he never explained. He always checked the stern deck personally before final clearance. He never ignored a repeated tapping sound, and he had learned after Mara vanished that water collected things. Not just debris, not just bodies. Echoes, accidents, last moments. The force of a life interrupted. He didn't think of that as superstition. He thought of it as professional respect. The apartment building where Eli lived had an elderly neighbor named Mrs. Kessler, who often waited in the hall to make conversation when she heard his key in the door. She remembered Mara. She remembered everything. 3 days before the woman in gray first boarded, Mrs. Kessler stopped him with a bag of mail in one hand and said, "You work the ferries at night, don't you? You should be careful this week." Eli gave her a tired smile. Storm coming. No. Her expression tightened strangely. Anniversary. Of what? But she only shook her head as if embarrassed she'd said anything and handed him a misdelivered envelope. That night he found himself looking through old records online, half from boredom and half from some pressure he couldn't name. He searched local archives about ferry accidents, waterfront disappearances, terminal incidents. Most were routine tragedies, slip storms, mechanical failures, intoxication, despair. One item caught his eye because it happened on his route. December 14th, 1979. A woman traveling alone reportedly vanished during an overnight crossing from Seattle. According to witness statements, she boarded shortly before last call. No confirmed sighting of her disembarking. Purse later recovered beneath a stern bench, contents water damaged despite no reported deck exposure. No body found. He clicked through to the scanned article. The reproduced image was grainy, but there was a photo, a black and white portrait clipped from what looked like a driver's license or missing person notice. The woman had a narrow face, dark hair pinned back, and deep-set eyes that seemed oddly intense despite the age of the print. Eli stared at the image until the browser timed out. Then he told himself the chill running up his arms came from nothing more than fatigue and the old apartment's bad insulation. The next morning before dawn, he saw the woman in the gray coat waiting at the edge of the dock. And somewhere in the bay below, something struck the hull from underneath, just once. Hard enough to make the deck tremble. The impact rolled through the vessel like a muffled heartbeat. Eli snapped upright in the wheelhouse, one hand braced against the console. Outside, the boarding lane had already opened and vehicles continued forward as if nothing had happened. He keyed his radio. "Engine room, you feel that?" Luis answered after a moment. "Yeah, didn't like it." Debris. Could be. Didn't sound like driftwood. Eli glanced down to the dock again. The woman in the gray coat was moving now, not hurriedly, not even naturally. She walked with a steady gliding pace that made the bodies around her look frantic and unfinished. She stepped through the pedestrian line without raising her head. No ticket fumbling, no phone in hand, no eye contact, no hesitation near the boarding plate. Tasha stood at the scanner by the entrance. She nodded through each passenger with that clipped efficiency of hers. Beep wave, next beep wave next. But when the gray-coated woman passed directly in front of her, Tasha did not scan anything. She did not even look up. Eli frowned. Did she just wave someone through? He murmured. There was no answer to that, only the rising hum of loading operations. He left the wheelhouse as soon as he could and descended to the passenger deck, boots ringing on metal stairs. The lower lounge smelled of wet coats, burnt coffee fryer oil lingering from some earlier shift, and that same faint sweet rot he'd noticed outside. He scanned rows of half-asleep commuter students, a nurse with her badge still clipped to her chest. Two men arguing in whispers over a Seahawks game, an elderly couple sharing a newspaper. Then he saw the gray coat near the stern windows. She had taken a seat alone, facing the glass handbag in her lap. He slowed. Up close, she looked older than he first thought. Maybe late 40s, maybe much younger or older, in the way some faces lost relation to age. Her coat was outdated but not antique, the cut severe and plain. Her dark hair was pinned at the nape. Her skin held a dull tone, not pale exactly, but drained as if all living warmth had been washed from it. There was no rain on her shoulders despite the weather outside. He approached in the careful tone staff used when assessing a potential problem without escalating it. "Ma'am, can I see your ticket, please?" She did not turn. For a moment, he thought she hadn't heard him. Then she lifted one gloved hand and pointed at the water beyond the window. Not a gesture of direction, more like an accusation. Eli looked out instinctively. The bay beyond the stern churned in the wake, gray-black under the fading dock lights. Nothing there, just foam and dark water. He looked back. Now she was staring directly at him. Her eyes were dark enough to seem almost depthless, not glossy, not human in the ordinary sense. They held a fixed concentration that made him think of old photographs of people forced to sit still too long. "You're late," she said. Her voice was low, worn smooth by distance. Eli blinked. "Excuse me, he waited before. He doesn't wait now." A burst of static crackled from Eli's radio at his shoulder, making him flinch. Luis's voice came through distorted Mercer. "You got a minute?" Eli pressed the button without taking his eyes off the woman. "Stand by." When he looked again, her gaze had shifted back to the window. "Ma'am, what's your destination?" No response. "Are you going to Bainbridge?" Still nothing. The passengers around them behaved as though the row were empty. A teenage boy passed by, nearly brushing her shoulder, and didn't glance down. A woman with a stroller parked in the next row over and never seemed to notice the figure inches away. Eli suddenly became aware of the vibration of the engines underfoot. The hiss of HVAC overhead, the smell stronger here of seawater trapped in old cloth. His scalp tightened. "Ma'am," he said again more firmly. The woman's reflection in the glass seemed wrong. The angle should have shown Eli standing over her shoulder, but in the dark window he saw only the woman and the black water behind the ferry. No sign of himself at all. His radio crackled again. Mercer. He stepped back hard enough to bump a seat arm. When he looked at the reflection a second time, it was normal, him, the woman, the cabin lights all where they should be. He exhaled through his nose, furious at himself. Fatigue, lighting, nothing else. He turned and headed for the stairwell. On the landing, he looked back once. The seat by the stern window was empty. Not vacant in the ordinary way, more like it had always been empty. No gray coat, no handbag, nothing. He went back down immediately and checked every row, both lounges, the bathrooms, the exterior deck doors. He even asked two passengers nearby if they had seen a woman sitting in the stern row. They gave him blank, faintly annoyed looks. "Number? Don't think so." By the time he reached the car deck, Luis was waiting near the engine room access hatch. "What's up?" Eli asked. Luis jerked his thumb toward the hull report panel. Starboard aft contact alarm flickered after that hit. Came and went. "Sensors are reading clean now. Could something be stuck?" "Maybe." Luis studied him. "You look like you saw a ghost." Eli nearly laughed, but didn't. "Passenger issue." "Drunk." "I'm not sure there was a passenger." Luis raised an eyebrow. "That narrows it down." Eli started to answer, then stopped. Explaining it out loud would either make it sound insane or stupid. Forget it. Luis let it go. I want to do a walk around when we dock. Fine. The crossing itself should have been uneventful, but the weather turned unnaturally fast. Fog rolled in low and thick, swallowing the city lights behind them. The sound flattened to a dark sheet. The vessel's horn sounded at regulated intervals, each blast hanging in the mist as if the air were too dense to let it go. At 4:58 a.m., Eli checked passenger cameras in the control station. On monitor 3, the stern lounge, the last row by the window, appeared occupied. A gray blur, human-shaped, motionless. He enlarged the frame. The image fuzzed with interference. Horizontal lines crawled across the screen. For one frame, less than a second, the blur sharpened into a woman's face, tipped slightly upward toward the camera. The next frame showed an empty seat. Eli stared until the docking call came over the intercom. At Bainbridge, passengers disembarked in the usual stream. Eli stood where he could watch nearly everyone leave. Nurses, students, construction workers, a man carrying a cello case, the elderly couple, the stroller, the boy with headphones, no gray coat. He waited until the upper decks cleared, then went through the ferry himself, room by room. Nothing. Not until he reached the stern exterior access door. The lock indicator showed it had been opened during transit. That was impossible. Exterior stern access had been restricted due to weather. He knew he'd secured it himself. He keyed it open and stepped outside into wind and thin rain. The stern deck was empty except for a black handbag resting upright against the rail as if carefully placed there. Eli approached slowly. It was old-fashioned stiff leather, the kind with a clasped top. Rain beaded on it but did not seem to soak in. He crouched and opened it. Inside were a compact mirror, a folded handkerchief, a ferry ticket stub turned brown with age, and a driver's license sealed in a cracked plastic sleeve. The license photo was grainy, black and white, the same narrow face from the article he had found the night before. Name Evelyn Voss. Issue date 1978. The ticket stub beneath it was stamped for the Seattle to Bainbridge route. Date December 14, 1979. Eli's hands went cold despite the gloves. Behind him, the water slapped the stern in irregular bursts. Then, very distinctly, a woman's voice spoke near his left ear. He took the others first. Eli spun so fast he nearly dropped the bag. No one. Only gray morning rain, the widening wake, and the churn of prop wash far below. Luis found him still standing there 3 minutes later. Dock crew's asking what the delay is. Then he saw Eli's face. What happened? Eli held up the handbag. Luis frowned. Lost item. Maybe. Luis looked at it, then back at Eli. You okay? Eli opened the bag again and showed him the contents. Luis whistled softly. That stuff's ancient. Tell me you can see it. Luis gave him a long, careful look. Yeah, man, I can see it. For some reason, that should have comforted Eli, but it didn't. Because if Luis could see the bag, then whatever had put it there was no longer confined to Eli's imagination or to the ferry. They logged the item and turned it over for terminal security processing. Tasha filled out the form. Eli watched her write the details one-handed while sipping coffee. Did you see the owner board in Seattle? He asked. Tasha didn't look up. Nope. Woman in a gray coat. Alone. Number. She would have come through your lane around 4:40. I scanned 26 walk-ons, Tasha said. None matching that. What if she slipped past? Tasha finally met his eyes. Nobody slips past me. Normally, Eli would have agreed. Instead, he asked, was anyone standing by the water before boarding near the edge? Tasha's mouth tightened. Eli, you need sleep. He almost said I found her bag, but stopped himself. Tasha had the evidence in front of her and still looked at it like nothing more than an old, forgotten purse. That night after shift, Eli went back to the archives. He found the full article on Evelyn Voss. She was 34 when she vanished. A bookkeeper from Bremerton. Divorced. No children. According to the article, one witness remembered her appearing distressed and wet before boarding, though terminal staff couldn't confirm. Another claimed she spent most of the crossing staring from the stern deck into the wake. A crew member reportedly spoke to her shortly before docking, but his statement was lost or omitted from later reports. Most disturbingly, a second article published 2 weeks later mentioned 2 more unexplained disappearances in Puget Sound within a 6-year span, both involving witnesses last seen near ferry terminals at night. Eli printed everything. At 1:12 p.m., after failing to sleep. He spread the pages across his kitchen table beside Nora's old thermos and began lining up dates, terminal names, routes, weather conditions, missing persons. He found overlap where there should have been none. Not many, just enough. Each disappearance clustered near winter, near fog, near low visibility crossings. And in every case, at least one witness described the missing person as seeming distracted by something in the water before vanishing. By sunset, Eli's apartment felt airless. He opened a window to let in the cold. Instead of relief, a smell drifted inside the same sweet rot from the dock. He shut the window immediately. That night, he dreamed of Mara standing ankle-deep in seawater inside their old kitchen. The water kept rising, but she didn't move. She just looked at him with an expression not of fear, but disappointment. When he woke, his bed sheets were damp, not sweat, seawater. At least that was what it smelled like. He sat upright in the dark pulse hammering and heard something from the apartment hallway outside. A soft, dragging sound, like wet fabric being pulled across carpet. It stopped directly at his door. Then came 3 quiet knocks, not from knuckles, from something hard and metallic tapping the wood. Eli didn't move for nearly a minute. When he finally looked through the peephole, the hall was empty. But on the welcome mat outside his apartment lay a ferry ticket stub brown with age and wet enough to stain the fibers beneath it. Seattle to Bainbridge. No date visible this time. Just a faint imprint in one corner as though pressed there by a hand with far too much force. Eli did not go to terminal security with the ticket stub. He did not call the police. He knew how it sounded. More than that, he knew the kind of expression people used when grief and obsession began blending into one another. He had seen it directed at him in the years after Mara disappeared. Sympathy flattening into concern, concern curdling into distance. Instead, he brought the stub to work and showed Luis in the engine room before the first night run. Luis turned it over in his fingers. "You're sure you didn't keep this from the bag by accident?" "I'm sure." Luis sniffed it. "Smells like the sound." "Yeah." They stood in the low mechanical thrum of the ship, surrounded by heat oil steel and gauges. Under normal conditions, it was the least haunted place imaginable. But Eli noticed then that the overhead pipes were dripping condensation in a pattern that made no sense, one drop every few seconds from a dry section straight onto the metal floor, though the pipe itself wasn't leaking. Luis followed his gaze. "I don't like this." Eli let out a humorless breath. "That makes 2 of us. You should tell somebody." "Tell them what?" "There's a ghost commuter." Luis rubbed his jaw. "No. Tell them you're finding old evidence where it shouldn't be. That's enough." Before Eli could answer, the intercom buzzed for final boarding. The crossing began like the others, lights, horns, the careful choreography of loading. But Eli's attention snagged on every shadow, every reflected figure in the windows. He checked the boarding lane himself, standing beside Tasha as walk-on passengers filed through. A man in scrubs. 2 women with yoga mats. A software guy with a bike helmet clipped to his backpack. A couple in matching rain jackets. 3 teenagers shoving each other and laughing too loudly. Then the line thinned. Eli leaned toward Tasha. "You see everyone?" "Obviously." Before he could push further, he felt rather than saw movement to his left. The woman in the gray coat was already on the boarding plate, one hand on the rail, ascending toward the ferry. Eli whipped around. "Hey!" Tasha flinched. "What?" "There," he pointed. Only empty steel ramp and mist. Tasha's expression hardened. "You need to step off if you're not fit." Eli said nothing. He strode aboard, heart knocking against his ribs. This time, he searched immediately, starting with the upper passenger deck. He found her near the vending machines on the starboard side, standing with her back to the room. The machine's glass reflected rows of chips, candy bars, bottled water, and her face hovering pale between them. Eli stopped several feet away. "Who are you?" he said. The woman did not move. "I know your name. Evelyn Voss." At that, she tilted her head slightly. "I found your bag." A pause. Then in that same low, worn voice, she said, "He doesn't let us keep what's ours." Eli swallowed. "Who?" For the first time, she turned fully toward him. Her face was wrong in ways his mind resisted naming. Not rotten, not theatrical. Just subtly misplaced, as if assembled from memory rather than flesh. The eyes were too still. The skin at the corners of her mouth seemed faintly water-softened. Her hair lay flat against her temples as though permanently damp. Behind him, someone walked past and did not react. "You took too long," she said. "To do what?" "To hear the knocking." Eli's throat tightened. "What happened to you?" Her lips parted. A dark thread of seawater slipped from one corner of her mouth and ran down her chin. Then the vending machine lights blinked out. The whole deck went dim for less than a second, backup systems humming, passengers muttering in mild annoyance, and when the lights returned, the woman was gone. On the floor where she had stood lay a thin line of black sand. Eli crouched and touched it. Wet, grainy, cold enough to ache. Mixed into it were fragments of something white and brittle. Shell, maybe. Or bone, Sir, a voice said behind him. He looked up. A young deckhand named Colin had come up the stairs. "You okay?" Eli stood too fast. "Did you see someone here?" Colin looked around. "Who?" "A woman. Gray coat." "No." Colin glanced at the wet sand. "What is that?" "I don't know." But he was already beginning to suspect. The archives had given him the names of the missing, but not a theory. His own mind provided that against his will if Evelyn Voss had vanished after seeing something in the water. If others had too. If she was still boarding, then maybe she wasn't haunting the route. Maybe she was warning it. The rest of the crossing deteriorated in ways too small to justify panic, but too precise to ignore. A child on the lower deck began crying and would not say why, only pointing at the stern door and repeating, "The man is wet." An elderly passenger slipped near the stairs and later insisted someone had grabbed his ankle from beneath the bench. A maintenance closet Eli knew had been locked was found open, its shelves, damp mops and buckets overturned as if by a hard shove from inside. And at 11:46 p.m., the engine vibration changed. Not enough for passengers to notice. Enough for Eli and Luis to exchange a look. They met in the machinery space while the ferry pushed through dense fog. Luis pointed to a secondary diagnostic feed. "Load variance. Aft drag. Something is messing with flow around the stern. Debris." Luis hesitated, not moving like debris. The hull boomed softly, once, then again from lower and farther back like a giant fist tapping steel. Eli keyed the radio. "Bridge to engine room, possible contact aft, monitoring." The third impact came while he was speaking. The deck shivered underfoot. Loose tools rattled on hooks. Luis muttered a curse. "Okay, I officially hate tonight." An alarm chirped from the access panel by the aft lower maintenance corridor. Unauthorized door opening. Eli and Luis both looked toward the narrow corridor leading deeper into the stern service space, a place passengers never entered. From somewhere back there came the unmistakable sound of slow footsteps on wet metal. Clang. Pause. Clang. Pause. As if whoever walked there were dragging something heavy behind them. Luis grabbed a flashlight. "Tell me that's Colin screwing around." "It's not Colin." They went together. The corridor was tight, painted institutional cream pipes, overhead metal grating below. The air cooled sharply after 10 feet, carrying the smell of brine and something fouler beneath it, like mud churned up from the floor of a stagnant place. Their flashlights cut narrow cones through dim emergency lighting. At the far end, the access door to the stern equipment bay stood half open. Water seeped from beneath it. Not a trickle, a slow widening fan. Luis stopped. That door was sealed. Eli felt the temperature drop another degree. "I know." From beyond the door came a low sound like someone breathing through a flooded throat. Then a second sound underneath it. Whispering. Not one voice, several, layered. Almost too soft to catch. Luis's jaw tightened. "We should radio this." Eli nodded, but before either man moved, the door opened wider by itself with a long, whining scrape. The beam of Eli's flashlight slid inside. The stern equipment bay should have held spare gear, sealed cabinets, maintenance panels, and dry steel bulkheads. Instead, the far half of the room was ankle-deep in seawater. Dark weed clung to the drain grates. Barnacles studded the lower wall as if the ocean had been pressing there for decades. Something black and slick moved along the ceiling, piping, disappearing into shadow before Eli could focus on it. And in the center of the room stood Evelyn Voss. Not alone. Around her, half emerging from the dark water, were 3 other figures. A man in a business suit with half his face obscured by hanging strands of eelgrass. A teenage boy in a varsity jacket bloated at the sleeves as though filled with seawater instead of arms. A woman in hospital scrubs whose hair drifted around her head as if submerged, though the room itself was mostly air. All stared toward the back wall, where something on the other side of the steel was pressing inward. A shape. Tall, broad, impossible to define. It moved not like an animal and not like a human, but like pressure taking form. Each time it pushed against the hull, the metal dented inward with a soft groan, then relaxed. Long ridges appeared in the steel suggestive of fingers, then smoothed away. A dark seep spread around the edges as if seawater were being forced through seams that should never leak. Evelyn turned to Eli. "He comes when someone hears him," she said. The business-suited man opened his mouth. Black water poured out splashing onto the deck. Luis whispered, "No, no, no, no." The shape struck the hull. The whole bay convulsed. Emergency lights flared red. The sound that followed was not a bang, but a wet, crushing thud accompanied by a chorus of voices from behind the wall, dozens, maybe hundreds, speaking in a tangled murmur too distorted to separate. Then one phrase broke through in a child's voice. "Let me back on." Luis stumbled backward. "Bridge, bridge, engine bay breach." His radio erupted in static so violent Eli tore his own earpiece away. The figures in the water turned all at once, not toward the hull, toward them. Evelyn spoke again, but this time her voice came layered with others. "It likes the ones who look back." The overhead lights died completely. In the dark, something entered the room. Eli knew it by sound first. A dragging wet heaviness. Then by smell, deep salt decay, cold minerals from places sunlight never reached. His flashlight shook over black surfaces that seemed both moving and motionless. A shoulder. A wall of kelp skin. There was no shape he could hold on to. Only impressions, a towering human outline made of drowned matter and shifting depth with pale things opening and closing inside it like eyes, mouths, shells, teeth, he couldn't tell. A long arm unfolded from the mass and touched the water at Evelyn's feet. She did not retreat. Neither did the others. They lowered their heads with the obedience of the already claimed. Then the thing turned its attention to Eli. He felt it before he fully saw it. A pressure in his ears behind his eyes, inside his teeth. A sensation not of being watched, but of being measured, judged for fit, examined the way a tide examines loose objects on shore. His flashlight beam climbed the shape and found impossibly a human face half embedded in the darkness. Mara's face. Not perfect, not alive, but enough. Her eyes open, her hair slick against her cheeks, her mouth moving. Eli took one stunned step forward. Luis grabbed his jacket with both hands and hauled him backward so hard Eli hit the corridor wall. "Don't look at it." The moment his gaze broke, the pressure lessened. The room surged with whispering. The towering thing advanced one slow pace, and the water around its base rose instantly to calf height. Evelyn's eyes fixed on Eli one last time. Then she screamed, not in fear, in command. The other drowned figures screamed with her, a sound so sharp and layered it vibrated through the steel. The thing recoiled, not hurt, but interrupted its form, collapsing inward for 1 second like a wave withdrawing. Luis slammed the stern bay door shut. The latch caught. Water burst from under the threshold in a hard spray, then stopped. For several heartbeats, the corridor rang with pounding from the other side. Not fists, not impacts, more like bodies pressing and sliding against metal. Then silence. Absolute silence. Luis and Eli stood gasping, soaked from the knees down. At last, Luis said, voice shredded thin, "We are reporting this." Eli couldn't answer, because on the inside of the sealed door, something had begun tapping gently from the other side. Metal on metal. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. The same sound from his apartment door. The report went nowhere useful. Bridge logs noted transient electrical faults and unexplained aft access issues. Luis described a flooding anomaly in terms carefully chosen to remain employable. Eli tried once to mention the figures in the bay, then stopped when he saw the expression on the duty supervisor's face. By dawn, the sealed stern compartment showed no standing water, no barnacles, no evidence of breach. Only dampness, a few strands of weed in the drain, one warped cabinet door. Luis insisted he had seen what he'd seen. That mattered. It just didn't help. Maybe gas exposure, the supervisor suggested. Luis laughed in his face. By mid-morning, maintenance had cleared the room and tagged the incident as likely sensor failure compounded by minor seawater intrusion during rough conditions. Rough conditions. Eli wanted to throw someone through a window. The bay had been unnaturally calm until that thing started pressing against the hull. He went home after shift and tried not to sleep. Failed. Dreamed again of Mara. This time, she stood on the car deck of a dark ferry lined with vehicles full of people who never moved. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady threads. Mara stood between rows of parked cars and said, He doesn't want me. He wants the one who keeps count. Eli woke at sunset with the words lodged under his skin. The one who keeps count. A ferry operator counted everything. Passengers, vehicles, time, clearance, lives. He dug back into records, but not public archives this time. He called in favors from an old maritime safety contact, pulled terminal incident reports, and requested access to internal summaries from past decades. Most of it was redacted or incomplete. Enough remained to reveal a pattern that felt less like coincidence every hour he studied it. There had been disappearances near multiple ferry terminals over 60 years. Not many, never enough to trigger large-scale panic, always folded into broader categories of accident, self-harm, or missing persons. But the details repeated. Victims last seen staring into water. Reports of hearing tapping from the hull. Passenger counts that came out wrong by one. Personal belongings recovered waterlogged in impossible places. In several incidents, crew notes mentioned a woman in gray or dark-haired female passenger not located post-arrival. Evelyn had not been the first, just the first one Eli could identify. By 10 p.m., he had another name, then another, then 5 total stretching from 1979 to 2018. All vanished after night crossings, all connected by witness fragments, all possibly still aboard. He printed their photos. He took them to the terminal. Tasha caught him pinning copies beside the operations desk and said, "What are you doing? Have you seen any of them?" She glanced at the pages unimpressed. Missing persons. Just look. Tasha scanned the faces. Her expression changed only when she reached Evelyn's photo. Not recognition exactly, more like discomfort. "I've dreamed about her," she said quietly. Eli's pulse jumped. "What?" She straightened at once, closing herself off. "Nothing. No, Tasha." I said nothing, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Take those down unless you have authorization." He didn't. He left them anyway until a supervisor removed them an hour later. That night's final run was under capacity. Fog sat low over the Sound like layered ash. The city receded behind them in amber smears. Bainbridge ahead was only a suggestion of lights. The ferry felt hollow, every footstep too loud. Eli started hearing the tapping less than 20 minutes into the crossing. Not from one point, from everywhere. Soft metal clicks along the hull, under the stairs, behind the vending machine, beneath the car deck. He walked the route with a handheld radio and flashlight while passengers stared at phones or slept. No one else seemed to hear it. Yet the tapping created patterns in his mind. Not random, intentional. A code almost understood then lost. At 11:18 p.m., Colin radioed from the lower deck. Mercer, we've got a passenger issue." Eli found him outside the family seating area with a little girl no older than 6, clutching a stuffed otter. Her father stood nearby, embarrassed and exhausted. "She says there's someone under the benches," Colin murmured. The girl looked straight at Eli and whispered, "The wet lady says don't let him count me." Her father blanched. "Okay, she's overtired." Eli knelt. "What wet lady?" The girl pointed toward the stern. "She's standing behind you." Eli did not turn immediately. Something in him already knew. When he finally looked, the far end of the cabin stood empty except for the reflection of the windows, and within those reflections, too many people. More figures than the room held. A line of shadowed passengers standing shoulder to shoulder where the aisle should have been, all facing him. Then the overhead lights dimmed. The father snatched up his daughter. Colin muttered, "Did you see that?" Before Eli could answer, every PA speaker on the ferry hissed to life. Static poured out. Then a woman's voice spoke over the system, clear and close and impossible. "Manifest incomplete." Passengers looked up in confusion. Static again. Then count again. The speakers cut dead. This time everyone heard it. Panic did not erupt all at once. It spread by contagion, confused glances, rising voices, phones coming out. A man standing too quickly. Someone laughing in that brittle way people do when fear has not yet named itself. Eli grabbed the intercom override, announced a false technical issue, and ordered crew to keep passengers seated. Then the ferry listed, slightly, sharply enough to send coffee sliding from a cup and a stroller rolling an inch before its brake caught. Luis's voice hit the radio. "Mercer! Engine response is lagging. Something's holding us aft." Outside the stern windows, the wake had changed. Instead of flowing clean behind the ferry, it twisted into a widening dark circle. A rotating basin of foam and black water keeping pace with the vessel, like something enormous turning just below the surface. Passengers began moving despite instructions. A man shouted that the boat was taking on water. Someone else cried. Eli pushed through the crowd toward the stern access while Colin and 2 others redirected people forward. Every instinct screamed that whatever was happening had reached the point where routine would no longer cover it. He hit the exterior stern deck first. Wind blasted him with a cold spray. Fog pressed close. The sound of the engine seemed muffled, swallowed by the water behind them. Near the rail stood Evelyn. This time she looked almost solid. Almost. Her gray coat snapped in the wind, though its hem stayed wet and heavy against her legs. Around her ankles pooled black water that did not drain away. She was staring over the rail at the churning darkness below. Eli stepped beside her. "What is it?" She raised one hand and pointed. Far beneath the stern, just visible between sheets of foam, a face surfaced. Not Mara's. Not any face he knew. Huge, pale, eyeless, human-shaped only in the crudest sense, rising and dissolving in the spin of the wake. Then another appeared beside it. Then another. Each one emerging for an instant before folding back into black water. A crowd of faces making up the curve of a single turning body. "It keeps what falls between numbers," Evelyn said. Eli's breath clouded hard in the cold. "What does that mean?" Her gaze shifted to him. "When count and truth separate." The phrase struck him with almost physical force. Passenger counts off by 1, people present then absent. Seen but not logged. A route built on precision, breached by a single error. "Why me?" Eli asked. Evelyn's expression changed, something like pity entering it for the first time. "Because you loved one, it tasted and did not finish." Eli went rigid. "Mara." Evelyn did not nod, but she didn't need to. "She's alive?" The question came out cracked. "Not in the way you ask it." The water below boomed against the stern. The ferry shuddered. From inside came shouts. Evelyn leaned closer. Her voice dropped. "It remembers openings, storms, grief, gaps in the count. Someone looked down. Someone listened. Someone answered." Mara answered it. She heard knocking. That image hit him so hard he nearly lost his footing, Mara alone by the storm-black shore years ago. Hearing something beneath the rocks, beneath the waterline. Something asking in a voice not its own. "She's in there," he whispered. Evelyn's eyes flicked downward. "Pieces." Then the stern rail behind her bent inward with a shriek of metal. A massive, wet force rose from below the deck edge, not climbing but unfolding upward, seaweed and black water sluicing off it. An arm, if it could be called that, hooked over the rail. Along its length opened clusters of pale membranes like lidless eyes. In the center of the mass, human mouths moved soundlessly. Eli stumbled back. Passengers inside the cabin screamed. The thing hauled more of itself into view, towering above the stern deck. It was not one body, but many outlines drowned into one another, shoulders, torsos, faces, limbs, all partially formed and continually sliding apart. Embedded deep within it like objects caught in ice. Eli glimpsed watches, license plates, a child's sneaker, a woman's bracelet, strands of hair drifting in impossible current. And there, briefly horribly, Mara's hand wedding ring still on it. He made a sound that didn't feel human. The thing turned its whole weight toward him. A pressure wave hit the deck. Glass cracked. Lights burst in a row behind the cabin windows. The stern doors blew open and freezing water rolled inside over the threshold. People fell. The intercom screamed with feedback. Evelyn stepped between Eli and the thing. For the first time, fear crossed her face. "Do not let it name you," she said. The creature, or whatever old, drowned force, wore human remnants as camouflage opened a vertical seam where its head should have been. Inside, instead of a mouth, Eli saw depth. Vast, dark depth packed with floating bodies and flickers of reflected harbor lights. Voices poured out, overlapping into a single phrase. Eli Mercer. Hearing his full name spoken by that many dead throats nearly collapsed him. The sound reached into memory, into grief, into every unclosed wound he carried. He felt Mara's absence become a physical pull toward the opening, as if he could step forward and end 7 years of not knowing by simply letting the water take him too. Then another voice came through the roar. Louise shouting from inside the cabin, Mercer. The ordinary living sound of it snapped something loose. Eli tore his eyes from the thing and saw just inside the shattered stern doors Louise and Colin wrestling with an emergency equipment locker. Flares, line, portable extinguisher, whatever they could grab. The creature advanced. Its weight sank the stern another inch. Alarms detonated throughout the vessel. Evelyn turned toward the others inside and screamed again, the same piercing layered cry from the equipment bay. Instantly, the deck around the creature filled with figures rising from spilled seawater like memory becoming flesh. The business-suited man, the teenager, the nurse. Others now, many others, some only partial, some little more than outlines of wet clothing and faces bleached nearly featureless. The lost passengers. They clung to the creature's lower mass, not harming it, but slowing it, dragging at it with desperate obedience to some final purpose. Not escape, resistance. Evelyn shouted over the alarms. "The Count." Eli stared at her, uncomprehending. "The Count keeps the door," she cried. "Make it true." Then he understood, or enough of it. Every crossing relied on reconciliation. Boarding count matched arrival count. Load accounted for. Nothing uncounted, nothing lost between terminals. The creature fed on the gap, on the human failure to keep truth aligned with numbers. The moment a person went unseen, unlogged, unaccounted for, some opening widened. It sounded insane. It also fit everything. Eli lunged inside, slipping on seawater, Louis manifest Mike. Luis didn't argue. He shoved the portable PA handset into Eli's hand. Passengers were crying, clustering forward, some trying to force their way up the stairs. Eli climbed onto a bench, slammed the handset live, and shouted with every ounce of command he had built in 11 years on the water. "Everybody listen to me, sit down, and respond when called. Crew lock every section and count physically. No estimates, no assumptions. I want every single person accounted for now." People obeyed because terror makes authority shine bright. Colin and Tasha God. Tasha had appeared from somewhere face white but focused, began moving row by row, checking tickets, wrists, faces, children's strollers. Luis took the lower car deck. Eli called numbers into the mic as crew responded from different sections. One by one, bodies became countable again. Specific, present, living. The creature hammered the stern doors from outside. Glass blew inward. Water sprayed across the cabin. Several of the drowned figures holding it were torn apart into sheets of black fluid and reforming limbs. Upper deck, east 14. Main cabin port 23. Vehicle deck occupied 9. Crew, including me, 6. Eli wrote the running total on his own arm with a grease pencil as fast as he could. 14, 37, 46, 52. He checked the boarding manifest. 53 passengers, 6 crew. Total 59. He shouted, "We're missing one." The creature surged. Lights died and returned blood red on emergency power. Somewhere a woman sobbed, "Oh God." Eli spun, searching the cabin. Then he saw the little girl with the stuffed otters staring at the stern waters sloshing across the floor. "She's not on your list," the child whispered. Evelyn appeared in the shattered doorway behind her gray coat rippling with wind and spray. She lifted one hand and slowly touched her own chest. The missing one, not a passenger. A presence, an uncounted dead woman still riding the route. Eli keyed the mic with a shaking hand. "One additional on board," he said hoarsely. "Unknown female. Gray coat. Name, Evelyn Voss." The instant the name left his mouth, every light on the ferry flared white. Outside, the creature gave a sound like the whole bay inhaling. The drowned figures seized it all at once. Not overpowering it, nothing that old could be overpowered by the dead it held, but anchoring it long enough for something to close. Eli felt it in the deck, in the hull, in his own bones. A ceiling, a realignment. Count meeting truth. The stern doors slammed shut without human hands. All pressure vanished. The ferry lurched forward, freed. Outside the windows, the black rotating basin behind them collapsed into ordinary wake. And Evelyn Voss, standing in the doorway, looked at Eli one final time with an expression so tired and human it hurt. Then she dissolved into a rush of seawater that hit the floor and drained away between the seams. By the time the ferry docked, emergency response had already been called in by systems monitoring and panicked passenger reports. Medics treated cuts and shock. Supervisors took statements. Management used words like anomaly, incident, structural event, passenger distress. No one wanted the truth because the truth had no place in paperwork. Officially, a severe mechanical malfunction combined with weather and electrical failure caused temporary loss of control, minor flooding, and panic among passengers. No fatalities, no one overboard. Incident under review. Eli and Luis were separated for interviews. Tasha avoided his eyes until nearly dawn when she finally caught him alone by the terminal windows and said, "I saw her this time." Eli looked at her. She stood in the reflection behind the little girl, Tasha whispered. She looked relieved. Tasha swallowed hard. "I dreamed about her for years. I thought it was just a face my brain made up from nothing." "It wasn't nothing." "No." Tasha stared out at the water. "I think she was trying to be counted." Then she walked away before he could answer. Luis sat with Eli on an equipment crate after sunrise, both of them too exhausted to pretend normal. "You okay?" Luis asked. Eli considered lying, then shook his head. "No." "Same." They sat in silence a while. At last, Luis said, "You think it's gone?" Eli looked through the terminal glass toward the Sound, now gray-blue under a washed-out morning sky. Ferries moved in the distance, small and ordinary. "No," he said. Luis nodded like he had expected that. A week passed without incident. Then two. No tapping, no gray coat, no impossible bags or tickets. Passenger counts aligned cleanly. The route returned to its habits. The ferry felt like steel again, not a mouth. Eli almost let himself believe the door had closed. He even slept through a whole night for the first time in months. But relief on the waterfront never stayed pure. On the 18th day after the incident, Eli received a call from a detective connected to Mara's old case. A storm had shifted debris near Alki Point. A rusted section of railing had collapsed from the bluff road above. In the slide below, search workers found personal effects lodged between rock formations. Not a body, just objects. A car key fob, long corroded. A single boot. And Mara's wedding ring. Eli drove there in a numb haze. The detective handed him the ring in a sealed evidence bag. It was unmistakably hers, but there was something wrong with it. The gold band was warped inward as though compressed by incredible pressure. Inside the ring, scratched into the metal from within, were 4 tiny marks. Not random. 4 short vertical lines. Tally marks. Count marks. He didn't tell the detective that. He just stood on the shoreline while waves pushed against the rocks and thought about the creature's body made of the accumulated uncounted. The ones who fell between truth and record. The ones partially taken, partially retained. Pieces. Maybe Mara had never fully crossed into it. Maybe part of her had lodged here in the world of surfaces and evidence. Maybe that was all the ring meant. Or maybe it was worse than that. That night, Eli went home, set the evidence bag on his kitchen table, and sat in the dark without turning on lights. Rain touched the window. The city beyond was muted and far. At 11:07 p.m., his apartment phone buzzed with an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, the transcription appeared on screen. It was blank except for one line the software had managed to parse. Manifest incomplete. Eli did not touch the phone. He looked instead at Mara's ring on the table. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then the ring moved, just a fraction of an inch across the wood, dragged by no visible force, leaving behind a wet crescent no wider than a fingernail. Eli stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. From the hallway outside came the familiar metallic tapping. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Then a woman's voice, quiet and close to the door. Not Evelyn. Not quite Mara either. Something in between. Eli had said. "There's one more crossing." He did not open the door. He stood motionless in the dark, staring at the thin strip of light beneath it as shadows shifted on the other side slowly. Patiently, as if whoever waited there knew he would eventually have to choose between fear and answers. The tapping came once more. 3 knocks, and then beneath them a second sound, water spreading softly across carpet.